Hi FlossTube, this is Steph from Just Keep Stitching. No, I have not started a new channel without Pam. She's still here, I promise. But I talked about in last week's video that I was going to come to Kia's house, Kia and Nathan's house of Kia B for Thanksgiving. I'm here, if you couldn't tell. And that while I was here, that I was going to record a highly coveted video that I've been getting a lot of questions for, which is a stitch with me how I stitch video. And so this is the best way we could come up with how to do it because they are the tech masters, and so we're gonna do that today. So this is just my introduction for that video. And so what I'm gonna be stitching on is the first installment of Snow Village, which is a Snow Village banner. And I'm going to kind of walk you through my process on how I stitch from start to finish, from the loading the needle to the making of the X's, and what railroading is to me as I understand it, and how that is my process. So a few things that you need to know before we get to the actual watching me doing the stitching is that I'm stitching Snow Village on everything called for, and that includes the DMC threads, the Cost Colorworks threads. I'm stitching 2/2 on 32 count linen, and the linen is French Country Rain from Weichelt, and I railroad every single one of my stitches. So I will walk you through what that looks like and what that means, at least for me. And if you have any questions or anything after you've watched this video in its entirety, please do not hesitate to comment down below, and I will do my best to answer the questions that you have. Watch this video more than one time if you need to. Fast forward through this introduction if you need to. And this is just my method of stitching. This is not what I was taught by Pam. Pam taught me how she stitched, and then I heard about railroading somewhere on social media, and I was like, I'll try it. And I found a real big difference in the way that my stitches looked, and it was a positive change. And so I was early enough in my stitching career to have it be something I could instill in the way that I stitch. So a lot of people say, oh, I don't railroad because it takes me too long, or it really slows me down. Well, if you've been stitching for any substantial amount of time, I can totally understand that. But just like anything else that's new to you that you're trying to learn, it's going to take time for you to perfect it or what have you. So if it's something that you're interested in, if you are frustrated with the way that your stitches lay, or you just are interested in trying something new, just take your time with it. That's the best advice I can give. So I'm not a professional stitch with me person, but this is the best I can do. So because so many people have asked me for it, so here you go. First and foremost, I use a Q-snap. I do not stitch in hand, so that's something that you should know before you take my word as gold, because how railroading would be stitching in hand, I have no knowledge to give you on that. I'm just doing what I do. So I have my pattern over here, but I wanted to start with how I floss my needle. So as if you don't know how to cross stitch, but still. Okay. So just in case you don't know, you do have to if you separate your threads first, then it makes them fluffier and when they lay. And then I'm also a thread licker, I'm not ashamed. And then I don't use a needle threader either. I've just done it so much that it just happens. Alright, so the biggest thing I hear probably more often than not is that how do you get your white stitches to lay so nicely? So first and foremost, it's not just railroading. I use a tool that is called a snag nabbit. This is a snag nabbit. If you can tell that this is sort of a ridged edge. They do not come bent. I bent mine. You get what you get. But it still works nonetheless, I promise. So this end, if you can see, is super, super, super sharp. That's the end you put into the linen. This is both the best and worst tool because I use it way more than probably necessary. But it really helps to pull my threads where I want them. So if I have a stitch where I feel like one of the legs is wonky, or even if you have a thread that's coming up through the back, all you do is you stick it into the hole where the leg is being wonky, and then you pull it down through and it straightens it out. Sometimes, like I've been known to pull it through twice or 3 times. Just do it as much as you need to, and I especially do them with white stitches because it's helpful. So if you are looking to get your stitches to lay really well, this is a tool that I highly recommend. Snag nabbit available at your local needlework shop, or at you can buy them online or from Joann's or what have you. Okay, so let me look at my pattern. Okay. So, even when using DMC, the way that I start and end my threads is, I don't use loop method or pin stitch or any of that. It's just 2 threads in my needle, no knot at the end, and then I find where I'm going to start. And then I usually leave a tail on the back, something like, I'm terrible at gauging measures, like 2 inches maybe. I don't really measure it, so it is what it is. And on the stitch that I'm burying, or not burying, my very first stitch, I don't worry about railroading, so. And then go through and leave about that much. Then through I know you probably can't see this, but then you have the big loop on the back, and you just grab onto the tail and hold onto the tail while you pull it through, and then it holds that down. And then you can go back through with your scissors and cut that off. Come on. Okay. Alright. So, my process of stitching is not only to railroad. Alright, so my first leg I always pull really tightly. So, if you look and see the distorted hole, it looks like, oh no, it's distorted, but it's not really going to hurt anything. That's just, I use really high tension on the bottom leg of my stitches. So railroading in and of itself is where you have 2 threads, and then you take your needle and you put it in between the 2 threads, and then you go in the hole. And then for the way that I stitch, I just simply lay the top stitch down like that. So I don't pull it anywhere close to as tightly as I do the top stitch. Now it will tighten up and straighten up when I come back through for the next stitch, but so and so then you pull it through. Alright, so this one can be kind of tricky because you're like, which direction do I make go in? But again, if you pull it, you can see where the threads need to go. So they're coming up this way, right? So I just put them in between here and carry them around and put it in so it's nice and flat. And you can tell that even though the tensions between the legs are different, it's not, you can't tell that the tension is any different. And that's just, see how that stitch, for example, you know that you need to go come down through the top as opposed to up that way. That's going to make it lay twisted. So if you go like that, then it lays flat. Just like that. So, alright. So this leg right here isn't laying 100% how I like it. So, take my handy dandy snag nabbit and put it on both sides. And it looks good to me. Now remember, it's going in your house. So, it's not, unless it actually is going to be entered into a fair or a contest, or if, you know, your life depends on this cross stitch, then you can really freak out about each stitch. But at the end of the day, it's not life or death, people. It's just a cross stitch. But it's easier for me to show you than it is for me to tell you. And I am using DMC B5200. I find that that's the best white for A, for snow, and B, for white stitches. If a pattern calls for white, unless it's something super primitive, then I do B5200. And honestly too, if your bottom stitch doesn't lay completely flat, it's totally fine. The top stitch is really where you want to focus your energy on making them look flat, if that's what you're trying to do. So I also, excuse me, when I stitch, doesn't matter what the brand, doesn't matter if it's hand dyed or not, I always stitch this way. When I talk about stitching DMC style, this is what I mean. Is I do one leg all the way across, and then I go back and cross it. Alright, I'm just going to go back and cross this row. So you can see how I do it. And again, I just feel like it's easier to have somebody watch it than for me to try to use words and explain it. And again, on the how do you know which direction to put your needle in when you're splitting them, it's all about feeling. and knowing your stitches. Like, I am self-conscious and aware of each and every single one of my stitches. Alright, so let me show you some of the bigger blocks of white, and you can see where I'm talking about. And you can really see where railroading really helps in the bodies of the snowmen, in the pennants up at the top. But again, I railroad with every single stitch I do, so it just really helped with the consistency and the tension and all of that kind of good stuff. So I hope that that all made sense. I know that sometimes I get weird and wordy, and so again, if you have any questions about anything that you saw, then please comment down below, and I will do my best to answer those questions for you. And yeah. So this is again just how I stitch. It's not, their cross stitches are awesome for a whole lot of reasons, but one big reason why it's awesome is that there really are no rules. So if you try railroading and you say, this is awful, Stephanie is an idiot, I don't want to do this, then don't do it. If you try it and you love it and you think it's great, then do it. It's all really up to you. Whatever makes cross stitch fun for you is what you should do. So that is my contribution to the How I Cross Stitch Stitch With Me world. So thank you.